Should you introduce what's happening?
So cool, I am talking to Brother Diago here, and he has a firm belief of the Bible. So I was asking him of certain contradictions. Most contradictions I ignore, but there are some explicit ones that I find problematic.
Tell me about yourself as well.
My name is Mashhood. I just have an introduction. I have a good interest of the Bible and Muslim-Christian dialogue, basically. I'm a Muslim and Ahmadi Muslim. As you can see from my shirt, love for all, hatred for none. So I had one contradiction which I thought was a contradiction. Brother Diago has explained it, but we let the listeners decide. And that was on how the Apostle Peter became a disciple. How did he initially meet Jesus? Matthew, Mark, and Luke talk about Jesus preaching in the beach, and when he finishes, he goes along, he sees Peter on a boat, and he goes, "Follow me." Peter abandons everything, and he follows Jesus. But then the Gospel of John says that after the baptism, Jesus is walking, and the prophet John the Baptist sees Jesus and says, "This, behold, the Lamb of God." And then basically Andrew, who is Peter's brother, follows Jesus, and he goes home and he says to Peter, "I found Christ." And then Peter follows Jesus as well. So these are for me, two contradicting events of how Peter became a disciple of Christ. Can you explain how there isn't a contradiction?
What for Muslims seems like a contradiction, like many passages, in the Gospels, in the four Gospels, they are not contradictions. They are apparent contradictions. It looks like contradiction, but it is not. One author gives more details than the other. For example, in Matthew we have the genealogy of Jesus. We don't find this in the book of Mark, for example, which is the shortest Gospel, Mark. So
can you explain this one? How
in different angles?
So how is this in
different angles? You said that, like, for example, you said in the book of Mark, yes, Jesus called Peter, and then in the book of John, Jesus called Peter to become his disciple, to start following him as disciple.
So the Gospel of Mark, it wasn't a call to become a disciple. It was just a call to follow me. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, it's an invitation to follow. Yeah, it's an invitation to follow. Yeah, follow me.
Okay.
But in the event in the book of John, only after the baptism, I can read here actually. Starting at is at 30.
Yeah. So the Gospel of John doesn't talk about any fishermen. It just has Peter's brother finding Christ and going back and saying to Peter, "We have found Christ," and then they both follow Jesus. So to me, these are two different versions of how Peter became to follow Jesus. That's my understanding.
Where was Peter before he was cold?
Where Peter was?
Sorry, say that again.
Where was Peter before he was cold?
Where was Peter before? According to the Gospel of Mark, we don't know. He was just a fisherman, and the first time he's introduced is he's in the boat. He abandons everything and follows Jesus. According to the Gospel of John, he is at home, and his brother Andrew says to him, "We found the Christ," and he goes, "Really?" And then they go and find the Christ, and they meet Christ, and that's the way it is.
So what is the contradiction?
We have two different versions of how Peter met Christ initially.
Well, Peter could have been in both places. He could have been fishing, which was his normal profession, right? So after the Lord meets him there, then later on he says, "Come and follow me, I'll make you fishers of men." In fact, it's interesting that in John's account, the phrase "I'll make you fishers of men" is not even mentioned. And yet we do know that Christ did say you must become a fisher of men. So one is giving a short, snappy answer. The other one is expanding more details from a different angle. There's no contradiction whatsoever.
So both events happened, basically.
Yeah, that's right. What's wrong with that?
Okay.
If, for example, there's a bomb that exploded right here, right, and I'm a witness, and I see two men running that direction, This gentleman says three women going that way. Later on, we make our reports, and I tell the police officer I saw two men running away from the bomb explosion. This gentleman says, "Oh, I saw three women running that way." Are these contradictory pieces of information about the same explosion? No, we're reporting about what an incident occurred from what I see. From my vantage point.
So I understand that,
So
but
I may exclude some information.
But no, but this is not exclusion. So if I see a bomb explode, and you say two men ran that way, and then another account says 100 men ran that way, that's a contradiction, right?
If I say 100 men or somebody else adds on 100 men, that's not a contradiction either.
So you say you saw two men, and another person says I saw 100 men. That's not a contradiction to you.
No, it's not. Because I'm a witness to what I have seen. I see two. That other man has seen 100. That's him to be verified if it's true or not. End of story.
So So this is where I got. For me, okay, I understand what you're saying. For me, that is a contradiction because it's one account here says of how Peter met him, and the other account has a very different version of it. And if to add to that it is a different version, it leads on to the second question: what was Jesus doing the day after his baptism?
Does
Right.
the text tell you?
The text. So the Gospel of Mark tells us after his baptism, immediately he was taken into the wilderness and he was fasted for 40 days. The Gospel of John tells us that after the baptism, the next day he meets John the Baptizer, and John the Baptizer says, "Behold the Lamb of God," and then Jesus makes his following. So the question is again, what happened the next day? The Gospel of Mark, Matthew, and Luke have him whisked off into the wilderness for 40 days. The Gospel of John has no wilderness, and it says explicitly the next day he was wandering around and people became his disciples. For me, this is not two events. Is a direct contradiction.
So are you saying the Lord never went into the wilderness?
I'm saying according to the Gospel of John, he didn't go into the wilderness.
Okay, what's the purpose of John's gospel?
So John, regardless, John is saying, Matthew, Mark, and Luke is saying, the day after or immediately after the baptism, he was whisked into the wilderness for 40 days. John is saying, no, the very next day after the baptism, he meets his disciples and he gets a following.
But he
This
could have been
is
whisked away from his disciples.
so the next.
The next day, if he was with his disciples,
So why? So the
and
gospel.
then he was whisked away, could he not have been whisked away from his disciples?
So you've taken both events together.
Both events happened on the same day.
Sorry, say that again.
Could both events have happened on the same day?
So this is
Feasible.
the problem I find where you present an account, for me a direct contradiction, and the only answer is that we take the four gospels, we mash them together and create a fifth gospel, which none of the four gospels say. So now what we have is after the baptism, the next day, he's with the disciples, and then the immediately part of Mark, where he goes immediately after the baptism, he is whisked away. That you've created a fifth and an odd account.
The continuity that exists in all of the books in the New Testament and in the Gospels, the continuity that exists with what is called apparent contradictions, that continuity that exists has been tested by scholars. Even Bart Ehrman is absolutely astonished at how different authors have managed to get the main storyline, the golden mean of the story is correct and comports with each other. So the witnesses.
So in this specific example, Bart Ehrman, who you just mentioned, classifies this as a apparent contradiction. He cites this as an example of how the four authors contradict each other.
Yeah.
So you have three contradicting the last.
Now we're doing a Bible study with non-believers. You, Bart Ehrman, and those people will look at it with a certain form of bias. You will be skeptical of it. When I said to you that could both events have happened on the same day, you said the problem I have is you have to mishmash the gospel. What you didn't do was answer the question. The question was, is it feasible that Jesus could have been walking around with the disciples, and then 4 hours later, he was whisked away into the wilderness.
So what you're saying is, after the baptism, Jesus was walking around. He makes his disciples. He then gets whisked away for 40 days.
Yeah, I asked you a question.
No, I'm answering. And then he comes back and he starts preaching on the beach. And then he walks along the beach. He meets the same disciples fishing, and he tells them, "Follow me, and I'll make you fishermen of men." And then they leave everything and they follow him.
Which is the story that you're speaking about?
Mark, Matthew, and Luke have that. What I've done is I've done what you've done. You've mashed the gospel accounts together.
No. What I asked you, the question I asked you is it feasible with the two events, not with the third one coming back? Is it feasible that Jesus, because now I've got to get the scriptures in front of me to look at the third part of your claim. The first two parts of your claim was Jesus was walking around with the disciples. Then he was the other gospel says he was whisked away. My question to you was, is it feasible that he could have been walking around with the disciples and then whisked away?
My answer to that would be, if you look at the text, in the parent text, no, because the Gospel of Mark says, after the baptism, immediately he was whisked away. Immediately. He makes it very explicit. In Mark 1, verse 12, you can prove what I'm saying? Immediately, the Spirit drove him into the wilderness. So, the Gospel of Mark would not agree with that account.
The verse before? What's the verse before?
The verse before is the Son. So, then the voice opened from heaven.
You are my beloved Son, in whom I am
well
pleased.
Immediately, so you have a different understanding of immediately to me.
No, I'm not saying I have a different understanding. What I'm saying is, what does the other scripture say?
The other scripture says the next day after the baptism.
Okay, hang on a sec. But we're talking about the Spirit then descended upon him like a dove. Then a voice came from out of heaven. You are my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased.
That is the baptism. Yes.
Okay.
So the Gospel of Mark then says. So that is, and then after the Gospel of Mark says, after the baptism, immediately he went into the wilderness, and he stayed in the wilderness for 40 days immediately after the baptism. The Gospel of John says John says after the baptism, chapter 1, verse 34, it talks about baptism, and John says the next day after the baptism, he is wandering around.
I did not know, but he sent me to baptize with water. He said to me, hang on, upon me, and you see the Spirit is in him, and this is he who baptizes with the Holy Spirit. And I've seen and testified that this is the Son of God. John the witness saying, I saw the Spirit descending from.
So right now they're just reading through the Gospel of John.
So this one, there's the baptism, and then immediately the Spirit drove him. So they're both saying the same thing.
So one is saying, no, Mark is saying, after the baptism, immediately he was taken to the wilderness for 40 days.
Right.
And the Gospel of John is saying, the next day after the baptism, he was wandering around making with his disciples. These aren't the same thing. These are two different contradictory events. It's not a major contradiction, but it is one that I do not see can be resolved by anything, basically.
I need to go and do some research on that. What's your name?
My name is Mash, but brilliant. We have that's awesome. I mean, rather than just waffling, you're going back and researching, which is exactly what I would say if I didn't know, if I wasn't sure. And I think I've said that like so many times over here.
I want to research, but I will research it and look into it. But what difference does it make to your belief that Jesus is God?
So that would be a bigger topic, but it shows to me that it adds support that these four accounts of Jesus are not fully accurate, and it supports my thesis or my understanding that it cannot be fully trusted.
Okay, so are you saying that you're a believer in the Quran?
Correct.
Okay, so if I showed you contradictions in the Quran, would you then doubt the veracity of the Quran?
If I couldn't answer those, I would give your answer. I'd go home and research it, and if I couldn't find the answers that way, it would cast doubt. Yes.
I'm so sorry. I've got a memory like a sieve. What was your name?
Mashhood.
Mashhood.
We can share details, and we'll like this is my stuff. This video is going to be on my channel, and then I've got his details. We can even share numbers offline, but everything will be there, right? So,
Mashhood, I want to thank you for a lovely conversation. Thank you.
I would. I'll shake your hand like that. I don't want to move your phone.
We'll pick it up the next time we see each other.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much.
thank you very much.
See, now this is. I met him when I was 10 years old in South Africa, and during apartheid, we sort of grew up together for 5 years. And I was telling him about Speaker's Corner on the way here, and I said, "This is what happens. You know, all that fighting. If you're looking at the dialectic, put forward your thesis, put forward your antithesis. Let's find the dialectic. Let's find what the truth is. Because I read a book about history, and if a book is written and another 3 books exist about that book in history, and it's exactly precise, and it comports 100%, then they say it's more doubtful than if there are some discernments.
I completely agree.
Yeah. So yeah.
I completely understand the idea of multiple views to the same event. My problem when it comes when the multiple views have a direct contradiction. If one says, like, if it's like the resurrection, one of them says a woman witnessed the resurrection, the other one will say these 2 women came, this one will say this woman came. That's okay. But if one account says, woman saw this, and the other one says woman did not see that, that's like, I'll give you another example. I know you have the answer, but the way Paul, his vision in Damascus road, one account says he saw the light but heard nothing, while another account says he heard something but did not see anything. For me, that's a contradiction, which I find a bit odd. That's where these examples.
But he was blind. He couldn't see because the light had blinded him. He couldn't see.
See, that's a version in the Acts of the Apostles, but Paul's own account of his Damascus experience says that he saw the light, but he heard nothing. So that's a complete opposite. Yes, that's where it's a bit dodgy for me.
Sorry, I haven't read it myself, so.
Yeah. But these are some of the examples I find.
Go back and read it.
Definitely do so. But good. We are done.